It's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And this week, my first question comes from Bruce Bartup, who says, which would you rather? A, lose a loved one. B, lose in love. Divorce, rejection, betrayal, infidelity, lies. Imagine all of them wrapped up in one. Are they similar griefs? If so, why? Assuming the scientists can't tell us. Why do the two resemble each other? What could be the evolutionary advantage? Always supposing you agree that there is some commonality to the two very different griefs. Which would I rather? I think I would rather B. I would rather lose in love through a breakup or a rejection or some sort of betrayal than I would lose a loved one to something like, something permanent like, death. I've been very fortunate as that goes. I've been in my present relationship for 11 years, and there's no indication that that's going to be ending anytime soon. And before that, I had relationships and breakups that were sad and that took some time to get over, but I never really felt like it would have been better if the person that I broke up with had died. It's a similar sort of grief, it's a similar sort of pain because you're dealing with the absence of a person, whether that person is absent because they have died or whether that person is absent because they're just not in your life anymore, you're not in a relationship with them anymore. You're still dealing with an absence, you're still having to adjust to a person who was always there and occupied a very important place in your life that you spent a lot of time with, that you thought about a lot, that, was in your heart, so to speak. And now you have to figure out how to do without that. And that's difficult to do, whether it's due to a death or some sort of separation or breakup. So they're related in that sense. As for how they're related evolutionarily or what would be the evolutionary advantage, I don't know. I guess we're social creatures maybe, and this is pure speculation on my part because I have no idea what I'm talking about. We're social creatures. We thrive in society. We thrive in community. We thrive in families, and maybe that feeling of attachment that we get to each other has an advantage in that it forces us to form, or it allows us, I should say, it enables us to form very strong social bonds. Like it bonds us together. When we're separated, either by death or by breakup or something, we grieve. We feel very painfully about that. And so that tends to keep us together. Maybe that is some evolutionary advantage that it has, but I honestly don't know. The Nightmare Rider. Hi, Steve. Given the whole drama surrounding criticism of the new Ghostbusters movie trailer, I've noticed there are some rather extreme reactions from both sides of the argument. I'm finding that there are some who too broadly label critics of the trailer as misogynists, completely ignoring any legitimate attempt at critique for what the clips present us with, while on the other side of the proverbial coin, there are those that seem to ignore completely the fact that there are people who dislike the trailer for sexist reasons, never taking into consideration how some critiques may not be legitimate. What is your experience with this recent drama? Do you also see one side ignoring the sexism in Ghostbusters fandom altogether, while the other side applies it too broadly to any critic who doesn't like the trailer or just doesn't want to fund another franchise, reboot, remake? I think the best way to look at it, the fairest way to look at it, when you're talking about the sexism of it, and the role that sexism is playing in the extremely negative reaction to the Ghostbusters trailers, I guess I should say, although the reaction to the second one wasn't nearly as bad as the first one, is you have to look at it in terms of a general trend. I don't know if it's necessarily fair to pick a random person who has complained about the trailer and say that person is a sexist just because they have some problem with the Ghostbusters trailer. But overall, is sexism playing an important role in the reaction, I would say the overreaction to the new Ghostbusters movie? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sexism can possibly play a role. I think it certainly plays a role, even in people whose critiques of the trailer are not overtly sexist themselves. And how does that work? Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that the level of hatred being directed at these trailers, and not just the idea of this Ghostbusters remake in general, is so vehement for a movie where the principal cast is all women. And even if your particular problems with the trailer or with the concept of the movie in general are not overtly sexist, is it not possible that you may have been motivated to have such a strong reaction to the trailer by some sexist social pressures? I think that that is the case in a lot of the people who have had a really strong negative reaction to the trailer, even if the specific problems they're pointing out are not overtly sexist. Because, I mean, this Ghostbusters movie is not the first remake or reboot that has looked like it might be bad, that has released a very underwhelming or sort of alarmingly bad for some people trailer, but I don't recall this level of vitriol. You know, I mean, maybe I'm giving too much credit or placing too much weight on this particular metric, but it is the most disliked movie trailer that has ever been uploaded to YouTube. And the fact that it has an all-woman cast and is very upfront about that and very sort of emphatic about that and proud of that, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think sexism plays a very large role. Do I think it's fair to call every single person who doesn't think this is going to be a good movie to just on the basis of that to say, well, you're obviously a terrible, blatant sexist? No, I don't think that's fair at all. But sexism, I think, is definitely playing a very large role in shaping people's attitudes and people's reactions to this movie. Mr. Teacher McC. Hi, Steve. Rather serious question for you. I have a close family member in a physically abusive relationship. After finally bringing charges against said person, they decided to have them dropped due to not wanting to cause their child to lose a parent. From this point on, I offered them all my love and support, but the one thing I've refused to do is have family dinner with said abusive person. For this, I've been chastised by my parents as breaking up the family. How would you handle this delicate situation? Were you trying to balance supporting a person you love with not condoning being around a violent and hateful individual? This is a really serious question, and I'm going to try to give you a serious answer, but first I'm going to allow you a rare glimpse into what a terrible person I actually am in real life. Because when I first thought of your dilemma, the first thing that came to my mind was how much I just really, really dislike family functions. So if I were in this situation, to me, in addition to wanting to support my loved one who is in the abusive relationship and not support the abusive partner, I would also be thinking, this is a perfect excuse to not have family functions at my place anymore. So that's just what an asshole I am. Do with that as you will. I don't know. It is a tough situation because I guess the sort of the choice that you're left with is how far are you willing to alienate the rest of your family in order to make this principled stand. You know, it sounds from your question like the rest of the family doesn't think it's that big of a deal, or at least is willing to overlook it, is willing to put up with it for the sake of peace. You know, the charges against the abusive person were dropped, so the rest of the family is just like, okay, let's just get on with it. Let's put this behind us. Let's respect and support the choice by the person who was being abused, and we'll just, you know, make do with the situation as it is. And you're saying, no, that's bullshit. We can't just let this slide. This is an abusive relationship, and we can't just support this and enable this to continue. And I personally, not being involved in the situation at all, being completely removed from all of this, I think you're doing the right thing, in principle. But it's very, very difficult. I would not, if I were in your situation and I were not, in addition to wanting to support my abused loved one, also looking for a perfect excuse to weasel out of hosting family functions, if I were in your situation, I mean, it would be a very difficult choice to make. Do you swallow your pride and sort of put your principles temporarily to the side for the sake of family peace? Or do you say, you know, this is a hill that I'm willing to die on? And I don't know, maybe, I'm sure that I'm telling you something that you already know or have already done. I mean, maybe it would be worth having a conversation with the members of your family that are telling you, you know, you're splitting up the family, stop causing conflict. Because you're not the one causing the conflict, you know. It could be seen that way. People could blame you and could view you as the one causing the conflict, but the source of the conflict is the abusive person, not you. It might be worth trying to make that point. if you haven't made that point already. But I mean, other than that, I really don't know what to tell you. I'm very, very sorry that you are in this situation, and even sorrier that that your close family member is in an abusive relationship that apparently is ongoing. I'm really, really sorry to hear that, and I wish I had better advice for you. Jason Braun. I watched Pretty Woman with my wife. She was overjoyed since it's going to get reviewed by you and Jason. The song Pretty Woman used in the film is a classic, but the views of women at the time were way different than today. The scenario depicted in the song on some occasions would be frowned upon. I know several women who've been confronted by men on the bus or street and have had to brush them off because they wouldn't stop talking to them despite them showing no interest. So my question is this: how should we respond to this song in these modern times? That song is one of those things that you don't really realize how problematic it is until you listen to it afresh, because it's a classic song. It's Roy Orbison. I mean, who doesn't love that? It's his voice is just incredible, and it's just this very simple, like, perfect little pop song. But yeah, you listen to the lyrics and you look at them with a more modern viewpoint, and you think about the awareness that we now have today that perhaps people didn't have, at least in the mainstream, 40 or 50 years ago when the song was recorded, about the forms of sexual harassment and street harassment that women face, and the problem that represents. And you listen to some of the lyrics in that song, and it is kind of an ode to street harassment. It is sort of a very romantic look at street harassment, told from the perspective of the harasser. The speaker in the song is the person who is catcalling the pretty woman walking down the street, And there's those lyrics when he gets to the bridge, pretty woman, stop a while, pretty woman, talk a while, pretty woman, give your smile to me. That's a little, you picture her sort of walking by while he's, continuing to make these demands on her. And it's not cool. Like, it's not cool at all. And it's a song that is celebrating a kind of behavior that we should not be celebrating and that we should not consider at all acceptable in our culture today. So I think the best thing to do with the song is to view it as a cultural artifact. It does play a very large role in our culture. It has, not just in that movie, but, it's the signature song of one of the great stars in the history of rock and roll. So I think if we care about music and we care about art and popular culture, we can't just pretend that it isn't there. We can't just ignore it. But I think we have to put it in its proper context, and we have to start to view it not just as an uncomplicated good song, but with a layer of complexity, and view it as a cultural artifact that can still be enjoyed, but also has to be understood as being what it is, which is representative of attitudes that we really, really need to leave behind. Chris Hansen. Hey Steve, first I wanted to thank you for being such a strong voice for atheism and social justice. I'm so happy to have found an entertaining, intelligent atheist on YouTube who is also an inclusive liberal. Now for something completely different. How does one spot great editing in a film? I know how to spot great acting, writing, or music, or at least what I like, but this one has always eluded me. Thanks, and I hope you feel better soon. Well, thank you, Chris. Yeah, last week I shot this episode of this series on my webcam because I was feeling under the weather. I'm feeling much better now. Thank you very much. Great editing. I mean, you sort of have to develop, in a sense, an ear for it, the same way you have an ear for good writing or good music. To me, a good editor is a lot like a good screenwriter in that you don't really notice the editor doing their work. The editor is who is directly responsible under the supervision of the director for the pace of a movie, for the pace of scenes, for the flow of a scene. It makes a huge difference. If you watch a scene that is edited with a lot of long takes, feels very patient, feels very deliberate, and you compare that to a scene that is cut very quickly with lots of short shots put in one after the other in rapid fire succession, or lots of varying camera angles cut to in succession, the editing can really, really change the tone and the mood of a scene. And the editor is an incredibly powerful member of the filmmaking crew, of the filmmaking family. But as to what makes good editing good, it's the same as good writing or good acting or good cinematography or whatever. And it's a matter of you identifying what you like and being able to then find it and articulate it in a movie. And the fact that, I mean, you probably have never really noticed the editing before. Because again, if it's done right, if it shouldn't be distracting. It shouldn't be something that's jumping up in your face. The editor shouldn't be jumping up going, hey, look at me, look at how cool my editing skills are. The editor should be sort of an unsung hero. But if you look for it, you can notice things. You can notice how long shots are. You can notice how many different angles are being used. You can notice if the editing is starting to feel intrusive, if the editing is disruptive to a scene, if you watch the movie and you feel like the movie is being cut too fast, or you feel like it needs to be cut faster, if scenes are dragging, you can notice those things and start to develop your own palette for what you think good editing is. Because as I say, to me, good editing is something that is invisible. A well-edited scene is the same as a well-written scene. It feels just right for what the actors are doing and for what the story is demanding of that scene. And I know I'm being very vague, but it's hard to get specific. You can't just say, well, a good editor is someone who has an average shot length of this. You can't, that doesn't make sense, because every movie and every scene has different needs and makes different demands on the editor as well as all the other people involved. But it's just something you just have to, if you're interested in that and you want to start developing stronger, more informed opinions of what you consider to be good editing, you have to just start looking for it. You have to start noticing it. And the more you notice it and the more you start to collect things that you like and things that you don't like, things that you think work and don't work, then the more certain you will be about what makes good editing and what doesn't. Joe McClory, thanks. The phone contact analogy really helped me put into... Joe McClory, thanks. The phone contact analogy really helped me put it into perspective. Also thanks to Bruce, who gave a nice response to the question. The question this week about late seating brought a happier question to mind. When you're doing the plot recaps for late seating, what do you enjoy more? Poking fun at a movie you love, talking shit about a movie you hate, or having a laugh at a movie you have no strong feelings about? And does your answer change when you add in the experience of watching the movie? Well, the experience of watching the movie does have a very strong effect on how I respond to it during the late seating podcast, because I have usually watched the movie within the last couple of days when Jason and I record that podcast. So I am very much going off of my most recent viewing, especially if it's a movie, as many of the late seating movies are, that I have not seen many, many times. Most of the movies we've done so far, in fact, I think all but one or two, are movies that I had seen before we watched it for the podcast. But some of them have been films that I'm not super familiar with, that I've only seen one other time. So for those reviews especially, I'm really referencing the last time I saw it. It does help to have strong feelings about a movie. I'm not saying that if I am sort of blasé about a movie that it won't be a good review, because if you can think up a good joke, if you can write a good joke about a movie, whether you have strong feelings about it one way or the other or not, then that to me is the most important thing. I mean, one of the most fun things about those summaries that we do is that we get to joke about the movie, we get to make fun of it, take the piss out of it, whether we like it or we don't like it, or we're just kind of indifferent to it. And as long as you can come up with funny shit to say, it doesn't really matter. But it is a lot easier if I have very strong feelings one way or the other. And I think it's actually more fun for me to do it with movies that I really like. Because there's less of a chance that it will get really negative and bitter, although that can be funny as well. But to me personally, it feels better to not get really angry and bitter about it, because it's silly to get angry and bitter about a movie anyway. I mean, I know I've done more than my share of pissing and moaning about movies, especially the Batman v Superman movie from a couple months ago. But I mean, when you take a step back, it's really silly to get that worked up and that, upset about a movie. But if it's a movie that I really like, because if it's a movie that I really like, then it's probably a movie that I've seen a bunch of times. So I know it backwards and forwards. I know every little thing about it. I know every little moment. I can recite the thing from start to finish from memory, and I've noticed all the little details that maybe you wouldn't notice on a first or a second viewing, but you would pick up through repeated exposure, and you just come up with better stuff, and you just have a stronger handle on the movie and what you like about it, and parts of it that you don't like, and that then informs your summary and your jokes and your humor, and it just makes the whole thing better. So for me, if I had to choose, I mean, I prefer to have strong feelings one way or the other, but if I had to pick, I think it's better for me, it's more fun for me if we're reviewing a movie that I really like, because then I get to make fun of something that not only do I enjoy, but that I know really well, and I have a much deeper well to draw on and a much stronger foundation to stand on when I'm, riffing, for lack of a better word, on the movie. So yeah, I think that's the way I would go. Movies that you like are more fun to make fun of. You know what I don't like, though, is the feeling of just utter inadequacy every week when that thunderclap goes off and I realize I have no idea what to say next. Because what that thunderclap means is that this main segment of the video is over, and now here I am left, as always, without a segue, moving from this segment into
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Lucas Hackett, one angry brony. Yo, Steve, which movie of the Fantastic Four is better? The 1994 version, the 2005 version, or the crappy 2016 version? The 1994 version is the best Fantastic Four movie, at least the most enjoyable, the most fun that I have seen. Peter Ballog. Steve, will you answer this question? The Insane Pumpkin Carver. Who has the most punchable face, Ted Cruz or Mitch McConnell? Good choices, but I'm going to go with Ted Cruz. I feel like if I ever let myself go, if I ever gave myself the liberty of punching Ted Cruz in the face, I probably wouldn't be able to stop. Somebody would have to intervene. Patrick Dodds. Steve, this might be the questionable question I ever put to you, but could you wish me a happy birthday? Come on, man. I rescued you from that burning building that one time, remember? Happy birthday, Patrick. Happy birthday. I mean that. I'm being really smarmy and smug and sarcastic, but I really wish you a happy birthday. I hope you have a good one, man. Knight6831. Hi, Steve. I have a new question for you, and it is, did you know that Hagerstown was originally where Fairchild Aircraft was based? And some examples include the C-82 Packet, C-119 Flying Boxcar, C-123 Provider, the licensed American version of the Fokker F-27 Friendship, the Fairchild Metroliner C-26, and even the A-10 Thunderbolt II. I did not know all of those particular models, but yes, I did know that Fairchild Aviation has a history in Hagerstown. It was, until it finally closed production in the 1980s, it was one of the major employers in Hagerstown, and the local economy kind of took a shit for a while after Fairchild left. But yes, Fairchild is still very well remembered in Hagerstown. People still talk about it often. There is an aviation museum that has a lot of Fairchild stuff in Hagerstown, and there's also a Fairchild exhibit at the Discovery Station, which is sort of a science center in downtown Hagerstown. So yes, oh yeah, Fairchild, even though it's been gone for 30 years, Fairchild is still very well known in the Hagerstown area. Matt Helmers, WWJD. What's with John Davidson? Well, he doesn't really do much TV lately, does he? I think he's been doing a lot of theater, like a lot of traveling theater, and I believe he'll be at the Reason Rally. So that's what's with John Davidson. Thanks for asking. I'm sure John Davidson really appreciates people still wondering about him. Vim Sweden, if you had a kid, what name would you give them? I mean, it would depend, obviously. I used to really like the name David, and I had one of my best friends for a lot of my life since I was a little kid was named David or Dave, And if I had a son or if I wanted to give someone a masculine name, it might be David. For a more feminine name, I don't know. For some reason, I can't attribute this to anything specific, but I've always kind of liked the name Kimberly. I don't know why, but something like that maybe for a feminine name. Ruby3Cat. Hi, Steve. I was catching up on your You Had to Ask videos, and I was so happy to hear that you've gone vegetarian. I have a couple of questions. One, would you ever consider transitioning to veganism? If not, why? Two, do you think that eating meat will one day be regarded as a barbaric practice by our descendants? Thanks. Well, I answered this in a previous question a little bit. Yeah, I do think I could transition to veganism at some point. I mean, I don't plan on doing it right now, But sure, of course I could. I don't have any objection to it, in principle. And do I think that eating meat will be regarded one day as a barbaric practice? I think a lot of that depends. I think if we reach the stage technologically where we can manufacture acceptable meat substitutes, like if we get to the point where you can 3D print a steak and it tastes just as good as a steak, butchered from an animal, or if there's some other kind of replicated meat that is palatable to people, and that becomes the standard, and meat actually butchered from animals is no longer the standard, then yes, I think the practice will become barbaric, will be viewed as barbaric. I think at that point the only people eating, what we now think of as meat taken from living animals would be, hipsters and religious fundamentalists who feel compelled to eat it that way as opposed to the new way. Carlisle the Cinephile, your love of the film Superman Returns is well known at this point. Are there any other movies out there that aren't generally well liked by most people that you enjoy and think are better than most people say they are? I totally agree with you about Superman Returns, by the way. Yeah, there are a couple movies that I think fit that category. For me, the one that came to mind as I was pondering your question is Stanley Kubrick's last film, Eyes Wide Shut, which is not hated. I mean, there are critics and also just audience members who really appreciate that movie, and I'm among them. But it doesn't have a great reputation. There are quite a few people who don't think that's a good film, who have some very negative things to say about it. But I think that Eyes Wide Shut is actually a great film. And when Eyes Wide Shut came out in the theater, and granted, I was only like 19 at the time, so take that with a grain of salt. But when Eyes Wide Shut opened in theaters, I saw it 5 times. I was like a devoted worshiper at the altar of the deceased Stanley Kubrick. And when that movie opened, I went to see that fucker, which at the time was a record for me, 5 times seeing it in the theater. So that's what I would say, Eyes Wide Shut. That's it for the lightning round. That's it for the questions. Before I go, it's time for the shout out. The shout out this week goes to the awesome Chrisiousity. Chrisiousity is a YouTuber who talks a lot about feminism and social justice and religion. She is not quite an atheist. Her identity as far as her religious beliefs or lack thereof is a little more complicated than that. And she makes videos talking about that, and she's just a really awesome, fascinating, progressive, inclusive, socially conscious voice to listen to. And I discovered her a couple months ago through her YouTube channel, and I've gotten to know her a little bit, sort of, away from just watching her YouTube videos. And I think she's awesome. I think her channel is great. I think she is criminally undersubbed, as many of these shout-outs of mine are. So my recommendation to you this week is Chrisiousity. She actually has a series called A Feminist Reads, which is a total ripoff of an Atheist Reads, by the way. But that's okay, because it's great, and I didn't invent that gimmick anyway. So yeah, she has a series currently ongoing called A Feminist Reads Beyond God the Father, which is really great, reading a religious text, a book about religion, about Christianity, from a feminist perspective, looking at sort of the patriarchal attitudes in Christianity, in monotheistic religion in general. It's a really interesting series. She's a really interesting person. She has a great YouTube channel, and I think you should subscribe to it and watch all of her videos because she's awesome. So there you go. There's your shout out. Chrisiosity. I also want to remind you, as always, to check out the Lemme Listen podcasts, which are the creation of my very good friend Jason Harding, who you know from YouTube as the creator of Opinionville. He is also the creator of this awesome family of podcasts under the Lemme Listen umbrella. There is Lemme Finish, which he co-hosts with Finite Atticus, which is just hysterical. There is American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, which is an awesome improv comedy podcast. And there is Late Seating, the movie review podcast that Jason co-hosts with me. And as I've already mentioned in response to an earlier question, our new episode of Late Seating goes up today, the same day that this video you're watching right now is being published. And the movie we are reviewing in the new episode of Late Seating is Pretty Woman, the Richard Gere, Julia Roberts vehicle, directed by Gary Marshall. And you'll just have to listen to the podcast to find out what we think about it. But you can listen to the most recent episode of Late Seating. You can listen to all the past episodes of Late Seating, all of the episodes of all of the Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcasts.com. check out those podcasts. That is it for me, everybody. I'm out of here. I want to remind you, as always, to please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until the next video, take care, everybody. So you knew I wasn't done yet. One last thing before I go. I want to thank you again so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like it and share it and subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron. Thanks again ever so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.